Good evening and welcome to the May 13th, 2026 Special Hybrid Planning Commission meeting. I am Chair Thompson. Tonight's hybrid Planning Commission meeting is brought to you by Zoom. Welcome to all and thank you for joining us tonight. Commissioners, please have your microphones turned on for the roll call. Deputy Clerk, please call the roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Neese,
Here.
Commissioner Gibson,
Here.
Chair Thompson,
Here.
Commissioner Hughes, here, and Commissioner Perez.
Here.
Thank you so much.
The Planning Commission meets in person and utilizes the Zoom platform for remote participation. I will do my best to recognize commissioners in the order in which hands are raised. After being recognized, you may then ask your question. The Planning Commission will now go into executive session for approximately 15 minutes to discuss with legal counsel pending or potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110, parentheses 1, parentheses I. The Planning Commission will be in recess from approximately 6:03 to, well, when we return, probably 6:20. Thank you. The Planning Commission was in executive session from 6:03 to approximately 6:30 PM. I apologize to those who are watching that we went a little over the budgeted time, but we did have some technology issues. Our first item of business is public appearances. This is an opportunity for anyone to speak to the commission about issues of concern, accept items requiring a public hearing, any quasi-judicial matters, or campaign-related matters. Staff, is there anyone who has signed up for public appearances as of 4 PM today who wishes to address the commission?
Mr. Chair, no, we have not had anybody sign up.
Thank you. The first item of special business is to review and consider approving the May 6, 2026 special meeting minutes. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion by Commissioner Perez and a second by Vice Chair Gibson to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, please conduct the roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes. Aye. Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
and Commissioner Neese.
Aye.
Thank you.
The motion passes. The second item of special business is Agenda Bill PCB 26-05, briefing on development code amendments, land capacity, zoning map, town center boundary and sub-areas, height increases, permitted uses, design standards, and consistencies. Welcome, Adam Zach, Principal Planner.
Thank you. I have a slide deck here. Let me share my screen. Okay, so we'll be looking tonight. I'm going to walk you through the development code, the proposed development code amendments that would implement the comprehensive plan update we're currently working on to achieve GMA compliance. Tonight, we'll be looking at those development code amendments in 5 high-level buckets. There's about 54 pages of code amendments. I'm not planning on going through those line by line with you, but I wanted to highlight some of the bigger changes and give you an opportunity to ask me questions in advance of the comment period closing on that in, it'll be like a week and a half from now. The first section will look at the phase 1 rezone of the town center and adjacent multifamily zones. The second section will look at the design standards and land uses in that phase 1 rezone area. Then we'll look at the inclusionary zoning that's proposed, the fee in lieu proposal, and then finally the step housing, which is shelter, temporary, emergency, and permanent supportive housing, the regulations for that step housing. So we'll start with the phase 1 rezone. Phase 1 is in reference to the station sub-area plan. This is the first part of that sub-area plan where we have been directed to increase development capacity in the town center and adjacent multifamily zones. As directed by council, the existing MF2 and MF2L zones adjacent to the town center will be rezoned to the town center. So you can see the existing zoning map is on the left. The MF2 zones are those green areas adjacent to the orange, which is the town center zone. And then MF2L is it's a small, I don't know if you can see my cursor on the screen, but it's a small area of pink down here in the southeast corner of the rezone area. The map on the right is the proposed zoning map. So all of those areas will, under the proposal, will be in the town center zone. Those MF zones, the MF2 and MF2L, those will become a 6-story sub area of the town center. And that'll be called TCMF6. We'll see in the next map we look at, we can see that kind of more specifically. And this is the extent of the rezones that will happen during phase one of the station sub-area plan. So even though that sub-area plan designates a larger station area, the only place where the zoning will change is in this area around town center. Yeah. OS is open space. That's the open space zone that was adopted in 2024 with our last comp plan update. You'll also see Mercerdale Park has a P designation on it now. That's the park zone that was adopted last year. My existing zoning map on the left is a little out of date, but yeah, everything, the parks and open space will be on there. So this is the MICC 1911-015 figure 1, which shows the sub areas of the town center. On the left, you can see the existing sub areas of town center. There were 6 sub areas. Under the proposal, that will go to 3. There will be a TC8A and a TC8B that will cover the existing town center area. And then TCMF6 will be those multifamily zones that are adjacent to the old town center that are now being added to the town center. The TC8A has the same boundary as the former TC7 sub area. The reason that we're differentiating TC8A and TC8B is that TC8A, adult entertainment is an allowed use by conditional use permit in that sub area. As we were reviewing this, we found that adult entertainment we have to allow it in a zone, and so we can't prohibit it in that zone where it was allowed as a constitutional issue. So that TC8A will continue to allow it. That's the only difference between TC8A and TC8B. The TC8 is referencing that the max building height in those 2 sub areas will be 8 stories. We'll take a look at that in a little closer detail here in a minute. But throughout the rest of in the TC8B, which is the light blue area on the map on the right, adult entertainment will continue to be prohibited. And that's consistent with the direction we've received from the city council. Any questions on the zoning amendments before I move on to the development regulations? Okay, I'll keep rolling here. So next we'll take a look at the land uses, the allowed land uses, and some of the design standards that will apply in the rezoned area. As I mentioned, so this is an excerpt of the table, the land use table in 1911-020. This table establishes what uses are allowed in a given zone and what permit processes are required. So when you see an N in this table, that means that that use is prohibited. And then a C indicates that a conditional use permit is required. I highlighted adult entertainment and warehousing because these were the 2 land uses that were regulated differently in the different sub areas of the town center originally. And so we needed to reconcile kind of that difference between the different sub areas as we were condensing from 6 sub areas down to 3. We received council direction to prohibit warehousing throughout the town center, the TC8 and TCMF6 zones. And then again, as I mentioned, that adult entertainment continues to be allowed in what was formerly the TC7 sub area, that area in the north of the town center. But the rest of the land uses, you'll see it was fairly simple to condense all of the TC sub areas into one because they all had kind of similar requirements for what uses were allowed and what permit processes were required. The design standards, I think you all are familiar with this. We recently went through the design standards to comply with House Bill 1293 last year. So they recently got a bit of a facelift. But the proposed amendments here are primarily to maintain consistency with that increased height in the TC8 and TCMF6 sub areas. So in general, the other design standards didn't get, there aren't many new standards or altered standards beyond the height increase. So TC8A and TC8B, the maximum building height is increasing to 105 feet, which is 8 stories at 13 feet per story, or roughly. That's a rounding. And then TCMF6 will go to a maximum building height of 78 feet, which is 6 stories at 13 feet per story. You'll also see in the site design section, the definition of public open space is struck in the design standards, and that's because we're proposing to move it to Chapter 1916, where the rest of the definitions for the code are. So it's not actually being removed, it's just being relocated to that definition section. And then the figures, so some of the maps within that section are being updated to reflect the new town center boundary, but don't have, all of the content of those maps is not changing. So the requirements that are established by those figures is not changing. And I've got an example here. So in 1911-020 figure 2, this is commonly referred to as the pink lines map. The pink lines on the map indicate where commercial frontage is required for new development. The map on the left is the existing version, and the only difference in the proposed version in the map on the right is that the boundary has changed. None of the pink lines have moved or been expanded. And you'll see most of the figures are in this section here, kind of talking about the ground floor uses, and all of them have been changed again to reflect that new boundary, but not substantively amended.
Quick question, just an observation. At 76th Avenue Southeast and Southeast 27th, there's a triangular lot that was not part of Figure 2 and existing, but now has additional boundaries. Can you describe that, please?
Yes. So if you zoom in on the existing, that was a pink line, like that does have a pink line. The way it is symbolized in that map was imperfect, but that was part of the pink lines map initially. And so we've cleaned that up. We took the opportunity to improve the maps where we could. Yeah. But that's not a change. That's not a substantive change.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I'll keep rolling here. So I guess before I move off of this, I think it's worth kind of revisiting why we're doing these zoning changes to the town center and adjacent multifamily. Those changes are to increase development capacity for mid-rise apartment buildings, to address our affordable housing needs as part of this GMA compliance work. So one of the things that we were required to do for that is to increase the number of those units that are more likely to be affordable at those lower income levels. And so this is all that capacity part. And what we're going to be looking at in the next section of the presentation here are actions that we're taking to address the adequate provisions part of the hearings board decision. So these are things that kind of support that capacity with other actions that the city's taking. So there's a relationship between the increase in zone capacity and these next couple of things that we'll be looking at with inclusionary zoning and fee in lieu. And all of that is kind of directed at addressing our affordable housing needs under the GMA. It's also, I guess, worth pointing out too, that this is all part of that phase 1 of the station area, which again is addressing where we found that that's adequate to address our needs for the affordable housing, that in conjunction with this inclusionary zoning and the fee in lieu. So there's all of that's all of this is really interrelated as you're looking through the code. I think it's helpful to kind of think about how those things interact together. So the inclusionary zoning, as I mentioned, this is one of our adequate provisions that we're taking for affordable housing. Inclusionary zoning is a type of zoning that requires a certain amount of a certain amount of housing units in a development be affordable housing units. The proposed inclusionary zoning will apply in the TC8A, TC8B, and TCMF6 subareas of the town center. The proposal is that 10% of units must be affordable at 50% of the area median income. And that inclusionary requirement you can find in MICC 1911-040. And that rate of units affordable. No, I already covered that. I will keep rolling here. So related to the inclusionary requirement is a fee in lieu requirement. And what this is, or not requirement, a fee in lieu option. The fee in lieu provides flexibility for developers. It allows them to pay a fee rather than construct the required affordable units. So we're requiring 10% of those units be affordable, but then we're offering the flexibility to then pay a fee for some of those 10% units that must be constructed. And those collected fees under the fee in lieu program can then help fund even like more deeply affordable units. So affordable units that would be affordable at lower income levels than that 50%. Which is a key part of our strategy for addressing our affordable housing needs, which are primarily at that 0 to 30% AMI level. So you collect the fee and then you use that to subsidize some of those units that are at that 0 to 30% level where we have the most need. As you're looking at the actual code to implement this fee in lieu, keep in mind that the fee is actually set in the fee schedule, which is adopted by the council via resolution. So you're not going to see a rate proposed or a fee proposed in the code. And that's a piece that the council will adopt by resolution. Just as they do for other permit fees, so like the building permit fee or impact fees, those are all set in the fee schedule.
Adam, I just have a question. So if a developer opts for the fee in lieu of on a 50% AMI unit, does the city get credit for that unit as an affordable unit? And then the fee in lieu of, when we use that money for 0 to 30%, do we then get credit for that, kind of like double credit for the fee in lieu of?
Right. I see Allison jumping in here.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say the short answer is no. You don't get double credit, unfortunately. So I think some of this is still to be worked out, but the way I understand it is when we look to check in on progress with the state at that 5-year check-in, they're going to be looking at, units that have been constructed. And then we can also look at housing that the city has helped to contribute towards through regional collaboration with the Arch cities. And, there's like kind of a small increment of the projects that Arch builds that we have helped to fund, so we can get some credit for that potentially. But the fee in lieu is essentially an exchange. So, the developer is giving us that money. We're going to be holding it in account until we've amassed enough to fund another project of some kind. And when that is constructed, then we would get credit for those units. But just having the money in the bank, I think we can use that to show that we are making progress and that we're doing something, but it's not quite the same as having the physical unit that's available.
And one of the challenges that we have is that our deepest level of need is at that 0 to 30% AMI range. And in our analysis, we find that the market doesn't really provide those. And so in order to have units at that level, there needs to be some additional subsidy that's providing for those. And so the fee in lieu gives us an opportunity to then generate revenue that can help pay for some of those units that otherwise there isn't necessarily a pot of gold sitting around for. And so it really, that's how this fits into our overall affordable housing strategy.
I just have, just in terms of the fee in lieu, is that a one-time capital cost or is that an ongoing annualized subsidy? How does that work?
It is a one-time fee that's paid at the time of development. And it's tied to, or it's usually tied to like a rate per square footage for the total development. Um, any other questions on fee in lieu? No.
I'm just wondering about is the assumption that because the height limits have been increased, that we would continue to still see some market production of 50% units, even if it's not required? Like, are we going, I was like, are we going to lose the middle? Or is the assumption that, because if growth continues to happen at the same rate as it does now, we'll continue to need those 50% units. And we could see, I could see that declining, and maybe the next time we see the group, we need more of those. So it's just the assumption that because they have more height, there'll be a broader mix and we'll make up for that without the incentive.
Correct. With
Or
some
without
of
the
that,
requirement.
yeah.
Okay.
And also I think so one of the assumptions is that while the fee may be attractive for some developments, other developments may find performance to be a better fit for their development. So this is really about like it adds that flexibility, like I said. And then it generates some of that revenue, or it can generate revenue. And we find that those 0 to 30% units are just are more difficult to accommodate. And so this is a tool that we have that can help us with that, particularly that funding piece.
Yes, Commissioner Pratt.
I'm not even sure how to ask this, but can we encourage certain types of building methodologies that are shown to lower capital cost?
I think we could look at that in phase 2. Yeah.
Yeah, I expected that. Thank you.
Mhm.
Does the code, Adam, you said that fee schedule has not been established, but does the code stipulate how the calculation is? You said square footage is actually calculated based on building size, et cetera. Is that in the code?
It's not in the draft code here. That's part of the Nexus study that is required for setting the fee. So one of the things that has to accompany the resolution that's setting this fee is we have to have some kind of way to show our work that fee is tied to a real number. It's not just, we didn't just make it up. And part of that study is going to show how that, is
Yeah.
that right? Yeah.
Yeah, so there needs to be, a connection, a nexus between the impacts of the development and the fee that we're charging. And so the Nexus study establishes that. It looks at when new development occurs, it brings more people to the island, they spend more money. Spending that money generates additional retail, commercial services and employees. Some of those employees need affordable housing. So it helps establish that relationship and quantify the amount of affordable housing that is the demand that's induced by new development. And that helps create the basis for the fee. The fee will be calculated based on the size of the building, the total square footage.
Yeah. But in terms of like, the code doesn't say that the square footage is measured like interior of the exterior walls or something like that. That's not, we don't need to set that here. We can set that elsewhere.
Yeah.
Great questions. Any other questions on fee and lieu before I keep rolling? Great. So the final thing that we'll take a look at today is the step housing The proposed changes related to step housing. Step housing, again, is shelters, temporary, emergency, and permanent supportive housing. Um, To start out with, the city was as part of the hearings board appeal of our 2024 comp plan update. The hearings board ruled that, or concluded that the city had met its obligation for planning for emergency housing in terms of capacity. And that was based on an assumption that these housing types would continue to be allowed throughout the city. These emergency shelters and permanent supportive housing fall under a category of use that's been allowed in most zones by conditional use permit since 2003, or at least 2003. So in the draft code amendment that you'll see that's before you tonight, no changes to where emergency housing and emergency shelters are allowed is proposed in that draft. So we'd be continuing or carrying that forward. There's also some other state laws that affect step housing and how we can plan for it and how we may regulate it. There's a requirement in the state law that cities may not impose additional development standards or requirements on affordable housing that are not generally applicable to development, residential development in the zone. And then this year, the legislature adopted House Bill 2266, which further limits how cities may regulate indoor emergency shelters or step housing broadly. So for emergency shelters and indoor emergency housing, I've bolded it here that cities must allow, cities can limit those shelters to zones where hotels are allowed, but they add the stipulation that a city must allow indoor emergency shelters in additional zones where necessary to meet their projected needs. So this really ties back to that hearings board finding that we were looking at on the previous slide, in that they found that we had allowed adequate capacity, and if we were to look at limiting this use further, it would require some additional analysis to show that this provision was met. House Bill 2266 also limits how cities may regulate these uses and what kind of development standards may be applied. There's a lot of text on the screen here, or on this bullet here, but in effect, what this is saying is that these step housing types cannot be subject to development standards that are more restrictive than those that are generally applied to residential development in the same zone. It does go on to say that you can apply any objective development standards, so like building codes and and density limits, dimensional standards, those types of things. So we can include some of that, some of those existing requirements. House Bill 2266 also stipulates that the permit process for step housing needs to be the same as any other residential use in the zone. This is in reference to like whether a use is allowed by right or requires a conditional use permit. You'll see in a moment, we're proposing to remove the conditional use permit requirement for step housing to be consistent essentially with this requirement. And then finally, design review for step housing must be an administrative process, meaning that the city can't require a pre-decision public hearing for step housing. Generally. So in the proposed regulations the proposed amendments to regulations for social service transitional housing and special needs group housing, which includes our step housing types, they would continue to be allowed throughout the city. The conditional use permit, the spacing and operational requirements for these uses is proposed to be removed. There are some additional new requirements for emergency housing, consistent with House Bill 2266. We'll look at those on the next slide. The state law enables the city to require that the applicant certify certain things have taken place between when the permit is issued and when the certificate of occupancy is issued for that permit. So again, we'll take a look at what's being proposed in the draft here in a moment. You can see all of these amendments in the draft in section 1906-080. There's also a section in 1915-220 that specifies that an administrative design review process will be required for the step housing, again, consistent with that state law requirement. So in some of the new requirements that would be added for emergency housing, consistent with that House Bill 2266, the applicant would be required to certify that and provide the name and headquarters of the managing entity, a description of the programs and applicable licenses that they have. They have to notify residents within 500 feet, which is a greater noticing requirement than currently required, which is a 300-foot noticing requirement. The applicant needs to conduct at least one public meeting and designate a point of emergency contact and document their policies and procedures for admissions, exit, handling complaints, staffing, and safety. So there's some operational requirements that are layered into the proposed development code here. So before I move on, are there any additional questions? Great. Moving on to looking ahead at our next steps. We have a meeting scheduled for next Wednesday, May 20th, to continue to look at the development code amendments. I think tonight we've covered most of the substance of that. So unless there's further discussion, we may be able to move on from or cancel that meeting. Allison will talk about that in the staff report here. But then after that, on May 27th, we're planning to discuss the capital facilities, utilities, and transportation elements. So these are the infrastructure elements that look at the potential impacts of these zoning changes. Then on June 3rd is your public hearing on this material. And then working towards getting your recommendation completed by June 10th. And that is consistent with the direction we received from the council. They've asked you to come with your recommendation by June 16th. So we're chugging along, but this list has gotten shorter, so that's good. I guess one more just process note to give y'all a heads up. We've sent out the public hearing notice. So the area, this is an unattractive map, but it was what I had. The red blob on the screen here is all of the property owners within that blob have been notified. And we've also sent notice to the residential addresses. So not just the property owners, but also the folks that live in the area there. The public hearing notice has also been published in the newspaper and published in our bulletin. So the word is getting out that that the public hearing is coming. I just wanted to let you know that. So in case you start hearing about it around town, folks have been getting letters. Yeah. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Just, is the intention to hold the public hearing in this room?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioners, any questions?
I guess, sorry, just to clarify, in addition to being in person, the public can join via Zoom and provide comments. The public hearing notice includes outlines the process for signing up to speak. If you're unable to come in person, you can still provide testimony at the public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Now we move to other business. Is there a staff report this evening?
Yeah, just a couple things briefly. As Adam was talking about the public hearing, I thought I'd also mention that the Mercer Island Weekly, the city's e-newsletter today, included information about the public hearing as well. And just before coming to this meeting, I posted a new article on the Let's Talk page about that public hearing. It includes links to all the documents for public review. I know one of the commissioners last week asked about when the technical reports, including the land capacity analysis, would be available. Those are now all posted on Let's Talk, the land capacity analysis, barriers analysis, displacement risk evaluation, and all of the drafts for the comp plan and code that we've gone over with you are also there. So for you all or anyone in the public that would like to review those documents to make comments during the public hearing, those are now available. A couple of the documents will need to be added in the coming days and weeks as they are prepared by the staff. Primarily, that is the second half of the comprehensive plan amendments, the transportation, capital facilities, and utilities elements. We're working hard to prepare those amendments now, and they will be coming to the commission on May 27th.
Could you remind the commission when public comments are due? I mean, commissioner comments, not public, commissioner comments.
So commissioner comments on the material from this evening are due May 26th.
All right, thank you.
And with that, I wanted to come back to the meeting next week. It seems like we've efficiently gotten through the presentation of the materials on the code amendments. Unless anyone on the commission feels otherwise, I think we can cancel the meeting next Wednesday on the 20th.
Any thoughts on that, commission?
Yeah, I was not able to attend anyone.
Oh, okay. I don't see any objection to that. We'll leave it up to staff's discretion on that.
All right, we will go ahead and cancel that meeting and just give you back that time to work through any comments or proposals you have related to that code, and you can just provide those to us in email as you have been doing with the other pieces.
Excellent, thank you.
That concludes my report.
The next meeting is a special meeting scheduled for Wednesday, May 20th at 6 p.m. There being no other business to come before the Planning Commission, the time now is 7:07 p.m. and the meeting is concluded. As a reminder to commissioners, please stay seated until city staff has terminated the broadcast.